Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. Ian Proud will be here with us in just a moment. When are European leaders going to embrace reality over Ukraine? But first, this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Blair to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Ian Proud, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule today. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show. Before we get to the EU and whether its leadership is even remotely realistic in its attitude toward the special military operation in Ukraine, a few other questions, if you don't mind. Is there concern in London and other European capitals about the continuing slaughter in Lebanon and Palestinian and Gaza by the IDF?
There doesn't appear to be. It seems largely to have fallen off the radar, I'm afraid to say, despite the kind of widespread protests in the UK across the summertime, which obviously the government tried to criminalise by cracking down on elderly people that were protesting against genocide in the streets. No, it's kind of dropped off the radar. People are focused on issues, massive tax we're about to face in the UK after this week's budget.
Were people actually prosecuted, or have they been, or are they being prosecuted in the UK for demonstrating against the Netanyahu government and its policies?
Yeah,
I mean, this
exactly.
is purely political speech, if ever there was any.
Yeah, I mean, Palestine Action was actually criminalized as an organization. So yes, anybody attending their protests were arrested and taken off to the beak, as we say it here in the UK. I don't think they faced massive charges, per se, but yeah, arrests and very minor magisterial kind of prosecutions were made.
Wow. Do the folks in the UK take seriously the prospect of Tony Blair as the Governor General of a new Gaza? Do they take this seriously?
I think most British people would be fairly horrified by that. He's a discredited figure since his support for George W. Bush and the invasion of Iraq in 2003 on the basis of extremely kind of flimsy evidence about weapons of mass destruction, all that stuff that we know about very well. So yeah, he's a hugely discredited figure, but he's just an international businessman, isn't he? He earns millions from this kind of organization that gives incredible advice. Who would want to take advice from Tony Blair is quite another matter. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to take advice from Tony Blair, but he's clearly kind of getting in the right ears, including in the Beltway in DC and managing to get heard by Trump. I mean, why on earth Trump would want to think about Blair, who's polar opposite to Trump in terms of his politics? Blair is obviously a left-wing, centre-left, but nevertheless left-wing person, and Trump is the complete opposite. So why he'd want to choose Blair is anybody's guess.
Doesn't seem that there's going to be a phase 2 or a phase 3 in Gaza. It doesn't seem that the Netanyahu regime has even taken phase 1 seriously, because the slaughter continues in Gaza and up north in Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has got his kind of token victory. Had that big signing ceremony in Egypt, wasn't it? And so he's kind of it slightly feels that he's taken his foot off the gas, and he's now focusing on forcing a deal in Ukraine, which from my point of view is obviously a good thing. But nevertheless, Netanyahu is kind of creeping back to his tactics from before that peace deal was agreed.
Is the British government concerned with the American government killing boat people in the Caribbean? Concerned either because there might be British involvement in providing intelligence, or there might be British victims if any of these people is a citizen or a member, I don't know if the word citizen or subject is still used, but whatever the word is, of the British Commonwealth.
It gets remarkably little coverage here, believe it or not, Judge. I mean, it's quite shocking, really, particularly when you see Pete Hegseth's recent sort of cartoon of some character, Henderson, is it, firing a bazooka at some
Franklin.
Franklin, that's it.
This is a Canadian turtle. It's a child's cartoon. The turtle is equipped with some sort of a military weapon. And he's killing people on boats. And if you read carefully the language up top, Chris, if you could put it back up for a second. For your Christmas wish list, this self-professed Christian Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, is actually suggesting somehow that children should wish this from their wish list.
I only saw that on social media, Judge. I mean, you never see that in the UK press. For some reason, it seems to be off limits. I don't know whether on the back of the scandal with our former ambassador kind of losing his job because of association with Epstein. The Americans have told us to shut up and stop talking about these things. But yeah, it gets remarkably little coverage here compared to domestic issues.
As I understand it, MI6 has declined to assist CIA or the Defense Intelligence Agency or NSA. We have 17 of them that we admit to having, our intelligence agencies, because, and this is reported in the Financial Times, the Starmer government is of the view that these killings are war crimes and they don't want British intelligence agents implicated. The American government claims to have a legal opinion which says they're not war crimes. Neither government will reveal these opinions for public scrutiny.
Well, they wouldn't, because those opinions rely on information from the intelligence agencies. But what I can tell you is that actually, whenever any of our intelligence agencies, MI6, GCHQ, want to get involved in this sort of, let's call it kinetic operation, then they need to seek ministerial approval for that. They need to actually write to the ministers setting out the case for their involvement. And I feel fairly sure that even this deeply unpopular Labour government would probably say no to that. And that's hence the reason you see the reports in the Financial Times.
Right. So it appears that the American Department of Justice, looking at international law, and the British, I'm not sure what they call it, Ministry of Justice, Crown Prosecution, you tell me what it's called, looking at the same laws, have come to two entirely different conclusions. What do they call the branch of the government that administers justice in Great Britain? What is the British equivalent of the American Department of Justice?
Well, we have a Ministry of Justice. I think it's called the Department of Justice under David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister. The Crown Prosecution Service is the operational arm. They're the people that actually look at and pull together cases, a bit like your attorney kind of system in the United States, and that's the difference. The actual kind of executive bit is the.
Do you have an Attorney General as we do?
We do have an Attorney General, yes. Although they perform a slightly different function from the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice is more involved in writing laws and proposing and scrutinising laws, whereas the Attorney General actually gives legal advice to the government on its actions. And so it's kind of, it has one foot in the courts and one foot in government.
Got it. What leverage do EU leaders have to intrude upon or with which to intrude upon the Russian-American negotiations over the special military operation in Ukraine?
Well, they have no leverage, but they're still trying to intrude.
Okay. So why would anybody pay attention to them? They have no leverage whatsoever.
Well, clearly the US administration isn't paying any attention to them because now the Europeans are left completely out of the peace tent. Not that they've already been inside of it. And the negotiations are entirely being led by the US administration now in a form of shuttle diplomacy, talking to the Ukrainians, and now Witkoff and Kushner in Moscow, obviously talking to President Putin and members of his government as well. So the Europeans are absolutely nowhere now. And in fact, all they're trying to do is keep the war going by stealing sort of Russian assets through this so-called reparations loan, which isn't for reparations at all. And that looks like it's very rapidly being torpedoed, not just by the Belgian government, but now it seems by the European Central Bank as well. So, Ukraine will run out of money at the end of this year, as will, in fact, Europe, but they're clinging on regardless. It's like a wooden dinghy that's been possibly torpedoed by Pete Hegseth, somewhere, albeit in Europe, and they're clinging on to the last few planks of it before it sinks. It's quite embarrassing to watch.
What happened in Geneva recently? Wasn't our de jure, he's hardly de facto, de jure Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently in Geneva speaking with EU leaders? And if he was, what the hell were they talking about?
Well, what they're trying to do was hollow out his this 28-point peace plan, which emerged, from the US administration. As soon as that was made public, the Europeans produced not one but two alternative versions to that peace plan. One, a 27-point plan, which the three national security advisors of Germany, France, and Britain had conjured up while they're in the coffee room in Geneva, while the grown-ups did the talking, and that tried to hollow out the stuff on NATO in particular, and then a totally delusional 24-point plan, which emerged from the European Commission, which was a complete fantasy, and that everybody in any case has completely ignored since that time. So the Americans have got back to doing the hard yards with actually having tough discussions with the Ukrainians and now with the Russians. It's for them to kind of push it over the line, with the Europeans undoubtedly still chipping in unhelpfully from the sidelines, but to no avail, I suspect.
Here's a comment from an American congressman. You have no reason to know of him. His name is Mike Turner, but he is a typical American neocon whose views, I believe, are mirrored by EU leaders. And here's what he said over the weekend on one of the Sunday talk shows, manifesting Russophobia, fear and hatred of all things Russian. Tell me if this accurately represents what European leadership thinks. Chris, cut number 10.
One thing that I think everybody understands is that you can't be America first and pro-Russia. Because Russia is a self-declared adversary of the United States. It's fielding new advanced nuclear weapons that are specifically targeting the United States. It's constantly attacking the United States with offensive cyber. It continuously identifies both NATO and the West, the United States, as its adversary. So in this, and of course, when it identifies Ukraine as its adversary, it does so in identifying the West and the United States as its adversary. You have to understand that the balance of this peace arrangement has to be one where you have to look at Russia as a skeptical adversary.
Is that pretty much how Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz feel about Russia?
Pretty much, although I'd say it's probably a slightly milder version than what you might hear from Friedrich Merz in particular, who's got the Bundeswehr out, burning torches and singing almost World War II-esque martial songs in the forests of Lithuania, according to their propaganda videos. I mean, Starmer just talks nonsense anyway on Ukraine because he came into government with no ideas of his own. And Macron, Macron just makes stuff up as he goes along anyway. So, but I mean, generally speaking, the tone I would say would be even harsher than that from that not particularly learned US representative.
So where are the Europeans going to go? You have opined, consistent with almost everybody else that comes on the show, that Ukraine will run out of money by the end of the year. The end of the year is 30 days from now.
Yeah.
What are the Europeans going to give cash for a corrupt system to operate its government? Are they going to be borrowing money to pay American arms manufacturers to ship arms to Ukraine? The arms still have to be built because they'll never be built in time. Is there a cache of arms existing somewhere in the US or elsewhere which could make its way to Kiev? I mean, how do you see this playing out? Where are the Europeans going with this?
Well, they're going to borrow the money. If they had any sense, that they would see what comes out of this peace deal, hopefully kind of get behind it and, support from there. But of course, the problem is that even if the war ends, Judge, the Europeans will still be on the hook for over $100 billion. Because Ukraine's army isn't going to shrink overnight. They're still going to spend a vast amount next year, far more money than they actually have in their possession. They will need that money from Europe, because they won't get it from the US. So it's actually whether or not peace happens is separate to the fact that the Europeans have a massive bill on their hands to pay in the next 2, 3, 4 years to keep the Ukrainian finances in the black. And nobody's asked European citizens whether they're happy about this at the time of deindustrialization of cost of living crises.
Does the revelation, we all knew about it, but does the revelation of the massive corruption scandal in Kiev resonate in European capitals?
I don't think it does enough, quite frankly. And it's reported, certainly on the BBC, which is kind of the UK's version of Russia Today, in a very kind of toned down way. But what you are starting to see is increasing numbers of mainstream journalists coming out to say that actually, look, Ukraine's in real trouble, and Zelensky himself is in real trouble. The parliament in Kiev is in complete chaos, right now. They can't pass the budget for next year. Zelensky seems to spend most of his time out of the country. Andrew Yermak has apparently gone to the front, I suspect with Kvartal 95, to do some sort of a documentary about how he saved the country. The whole system, the European system is kind of driving towards a brick wall with, Ursula von der Leyen and Kai Kallas with both feet on the accelerator pedal.
Wow.
That's where we are right now. And whatever happens, we're still going to have to pay billions and billions to Ukraine to keep it afloat, even if the fighting stops. So that whether we buy any weapons from the US is immaterial to the fact that we still have a huge bill.
Here's a good friend of Kaya Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen. Tell me what you think of the EU demands for peace with Russia.
Any credible and sustainable peace plan should first and foremost stop the killing and end the war while not sowing the seeds for future conflict. We have agreed on the main elements necessary for a just and lasting peace and Ukraine's sovereignty. And let me highlight 3 of them. First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, as a sovereign nation, there cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attack and thereby also undermining European security. Third, the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected. Ukraine must have the freedom and sovereign right to choose its own destiny. They have chosen a European destiny. It starts with the country's reconstruction, its integration into our single market and our defense industrial base, and ultimately joining our union. We will continue our work together with Ukraine, our member states, the coalition of the willing and the United States, to make real progress towards peace. What is important is that we move forward as partners on a single track.
Is she delusional?
Yes. I mean, the first point is completely obvious. Clearly, borders shouldn't be changed by force. Everybody knows that, but that's meaningless in terms of a peace plan because the borders have changed because of events. Now, you can argue who's to blame for that, but that's the way it is, unfortunately, at this stage in the war. On the second point, in terms of capping Ukraine's army, I mean, Ukraine can't afford to have an army of 1 million personnel. I mean, if it does, then we're going to be paying for it. And actually, at the same time, Ukraine will have an army 10 times bigger than Germany's army. And do we really want that? And in terms of the European future, okay, that all sounds motherhood and apple pie, but actually, it's not at all clear that that some EU member states really want Ukraine to join. Certainly not Poland or France, for that matter, because they'll lose all their massive subsidies. That's why. Notice when you look back at that video again, she talks about eventually Ukraine joining the Union. That's not going to happen for 10 to 15 years, Judge, because nobody wants it in the EU. It's fine, getting them into the defense industrial complex, even getting into the single market is problematic because of the low cost of Ukrainian agricultural exports. This is all total waffle.
Where did she come from? I mean, how did she acquire the position that she now has? She wasn't popularly elected by the people of Europe, was she?
Well, nobody in the commission is elected. That's the point. There's a big pork barrel negotiation. Whenever there's a change of these apparatchiks at the top, every country in the European Union gets one person. Germany got the top spot, and unfortunately, it was Buggin's turn, and we ended up with her. In the same way that Annalena Baerbock is somehow president of the United Nations General Assembly. Strange things happen, Judge. But I mean, democratic, the European Union most certainly is not, unlike the individual countries, of course, within it.
Wow. Ian, thank you very much, my dear friend. It's great to be able to chat with you, and we appreciate your perspective and your observations from Great Britain. We hope you'll join us again soon.
Thanks, Judge. Nice to talk to you again. Talk soon.
Likewise. Coming up later today at 1 this afternoon on all of this, including the Hegseth killings in the Caribbean, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, and at 3 o'clock on all of this, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.